But when the Ukraine war started and America and the West applied the sanctions, the US dollar sanctions, the SWIFT sanctions, most of them to cut Russia off from the SWIFT, that had unintended consequences. And I don't think the US really thought it through. They were so focused on how do we take down Russia for this aggression that they didn't think about two things. They didn't think about what banning Russia from the SWIFT system would message to the rest of the world. And they didn't think about the consequences of inflation because food prices and energy prices skyrocketed. You know, a lot of the grain and fertilizer comes from Ukraine and Russia. Oil, lots of it comes from Russia.
It has been a while since the United States and its allies launched a flurry of sanctions on Russia for annexing Ukraine and starting a conflict that has lasted longer than anyone anticipated. However, according to Frank Justra, the CEO of the Flurry group of firms, those sanctions are now having a negative effect on the United States. The Canadian businessman and former Merrill Lynch stock trader recently spoke with Stansberry Research about China's growing de-dollarization drive and, in particular, the country's closer ties with Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Giustra serves as co-chair of the International Crisis Group, a transnational non-profit non-governmental organization that aims to avert wars and influence legislation to create a more peaceful world. Giustra provides an insider account of the politics behind the de-dollarization of international trade and the eventual formation of a multipolar world and the U.S. hegemony during his discussion with Stansberry. A renowned Canadian company claims that in their attempt to hold Russia accountable for its numerous breaches, Westford authorities neglected to take into account how other nations would view and react to the sanctions against Russia. Several nations have become more outspoken in recent months about how they view these sanctions, and as a result, they have all decided to lessen their reliance on the US and the USD. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable post alerts before listening to this incredibly enlightening debate to ensure that you don't miss any of our upcoming uploads. Also make sure to share your thoughts and observations in the space below the video because everything you do helps the channel develop and works to improve the YouTube algorithm. Thank you, and have fun watching the video.
I don't think they saw this coming. And by the way, the Saudi-Iran deal, which was brokered by China, surprised everybody, including the US, although they won't admit it. You know, I'm part of the International Crisis Group. I chair that organization. And so we were actually in Qatar when that happened. And we had organized some dialogue privately between Iran and Saudi Arabia some 4 years ago, between, you know, just not officials, but people within the elite groups in both countries to start a dialogue. And then Iraq and Oman took over the conversation, but no one saw this deal coming, no one. And yes, the US is definitely worried that they're losing their power in the Middle East, but in essence, they chose that, they made that decision a while back to pull back from the Middle East and focus on containing China. And so what did Saudi do? You know, while the US was protecting Saudi Arabia, it was happy not to engage in diplomatic relations because it would always come to its defense. But then when there was that attack by Iran, we knew it was Iran, but they never admitted it. There was an attack on the Saudi oil field facilities, and the US did not come to its rescue under Trump. Saudi Arabia decided, whoa. Now, if America's not there to help, we have to do two things: cozy up with China and start dialogue with our foes. And that's how this all came about. And it's because America withdrew diplomatically and militarily, in a sense, from the region. The changes were already happening prior to the Ukraine war. There was a movement, obviously sponsored by China and Russia, to move away from the US dollar, and they were making all sorts of noises about having a different alternative reserve currency. But when the Ukraine war started and America and the West applied the sanctions, the US dollar sanctions, the SWIFT sanctions, most of them to cut Russia off from the SWIFT, that had unintended consequences. People seem to think that the policymakers in Washington or other capitals really understand what they're doing. And you'd be surprised how little they think these things through sometimes. They act and without thinking of the consequences. And I think the consequences has now created a global movement to move away from the dollar. It's not just China and Russia now. Now you got the BRICS nations plus all the new members that want to join BRICS. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Algeria, UAE, Egypt, Turkey. The BRICS is going to expand as a trading group, and they want to create their own currency. And now they're very vocal. When we spoke about this 6 months ago, it wasn't being talked about. Now they're talking about
Right.
it openly. And I think that's the direction we're headed towards. And I think it's going to happen sooner than people think. I don't know how long it'll take to implement, but I think the conversation about launching some alternative to the US dollar for trade and settlement purposes is in the works.
Yeah.
And I also believe that it will have, the gold's going to play a role in that. China has moved very quickly in the last 12 months. And now you've seen China talk about its special relationship with Russia. It talks about its all-dimensional energy development program with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries. It talks about its strategic comprehensive partnership with Iran. And it's all meant to do one thing, to do two things: to buy oil at a discount, which is buying from Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. And by the way, 3 countries that are under sanction by the US hold 40% of the world's oil reserves. Okay? And China is benefiting because it's buying that oil at a discount, and it's forcing those nations to take RMBs as payment, not dollars. So it's already establishing a pathway to trade in what we're going to call the petro yuan. And it might achieve success, it might not. I think that the alternative currency will be a basket as opposed to the petro yuan taking over from the dollar. Okay, but China is basically kumbayaing with everybody right now.
Exactly.
And they're doing it because they see an opportunity now, and they're moving very quickly. And that's why they decided to become a broker to the Saudi Arabian Iran situation, because it allows them to secure their long-term energy needs. I worry about what's about to happen, because almost never in history do you see a transition from one global power to another without conflict. Okay, it only happened in the recent few hundred years between the UK and the US after World War II, and there was a peaceful transition. You know, the British Empire came crumbling down, and America took over because they had most of the world's gold and half the world's GDP after World War II. So they were basically it was gold that provided the ability for them to take over the financial world, and they had it until 1971 when they lost their trust by going off the gold standard. But I think the problem is that, and the United States is painting China as a dangerous enemy that has to be contained. But the reality is that they're seeing China's economic might taking over, and that is putting a lot of fear into a lot of Americans, and they're not going to go down without some form of a fight. So I just hope it's not a hot war. That is my worst fear. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. I really, it's our organization, Crisis Group, is in the business of trying to prevent that sort of thing. So, you just hope that cooler heads prevail. But the rhetoric is just becoming crazy, and China is becoming more vocal about its military strength and what it will do if certain things happen, especially over Taiwan.
What are your thoughts on the de-dollarization plan backed by China and Russia? Do you think the two nations can implement deep learning for a system that has been in place for more than 50 years? In the section below, please share your thoughts and views about this insightful video. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, Market Empire, and enable post notifications if you want to be notified right away whenever we upload a new video. Many thanks for tuning in.